Far More Than We Think, Making Sense of Spirituality by Angelo. Chapter 50. Kidding Ourselves. Not everyone has the opportunity to have children, but for those of us that do, we tend to find them to be a source of great joy, but much worry and frustration as well. Many of us have kids whilst we are still effectively kids ourselves, and this can make things very challenging indeed. My own track record of parenting leaves much to be desired, but nevertheless there are lessons to be learned once we incorporate spirituality into the picture. In the chapter on the subconscious mind, we touched on the impact of those early childhood years on our later experiences of life. As parents, we have our own set of beliefs and behaviours, often either mimicking our own parents or doing the opposite of what we consider to be the mistakes our parents made. The key point is that we bring up our children based on our own beliefs. We try to mould them into what we believe a perfect child should be, and this can be quite a battle at times. In addition, we expose our children to the frailties of our personalities and the difficulties within our relationships. All of this inevitably leads to a great deal of negative messaging, e.g., don't do that, you're naughty and bad, you should do better, you are ungrateful, you are a disgrace and deserve to be punished, and so on ad infinitum. All of these messages go straight into a child's subconscious, and a picture of fear and negativity builds up within him or her. If we withhold love from our children, they learn that love is conditional, not unconditional. If our children experience criticism, hostility, fear, self-pity, ridicule, jealousy, greed, shame, punishment, insecurity, stress, dishonesty, boredom and selfishness, then these feelings and behaviours get programmed into them as if we were loading data onto a hard disk. If we punish our children for honestly expressing themselves, we teach them to conceal their true nature and hide their real feelings. And children get so used to doing this that they can lose touch with who they really are, and this causes great problems in later life. If, as parents, we foist our own failed ambitions onto our children, or we make them feel that they must achieve certain standards, we teach them to be dissatisfied with themselves and to constantly be striving for improvement and engaged in self-criticism. These negative self-images can create a lifetime of insecurity and hidden suffering. All of these messages are so powerfully negative, yet they're often delivered by the very people who are trying to love them the most. On the other hand, if our children experience love, encouragement, praise, patience, acceptance, forgiveness, generosity, reward, security, serenity, honesty, curiosity and sharing, then likewise they will soak it all up without even realizing it. Allowing children to experience being perfectly good enough will help them to feel nurtured and safe and comfortable in their own skin. It may be much easier in the short term to use the stick, but the carrot will always produce better results in the longer term. The power of praise is often overlooked in favour of criticism. Our egos like to find fault and blame, even when it comes to dealing with children. In truth, our kids pick up a whole complex mixture of subconscious programming from various sources, but ultimately it's our contribution as parents that will make the biggest difference. We may want to blame it on the genes, but in truth, our kids turn out very much the way that we influence them to be. The ego will not like this idea, but the spirit knows it to be true. We have enormous responsibility as parents, and many of us unintentionally fall short because we ourselves are still prone to the programming we received as children. Somewhere along the line we need to break the cycle so that enlightened parents can raise enlightened children. We owe it to our children to teach them spiritual principles from an early age so that they can grow up to enjoy the beauty of the world rather than suffer the ugliness. We can only do this if we are spiritually aware ourselves. This now gives us a double imperative to adopt spiritual principles and to live as love. We benefit ourselves and our children, or perhaps our grandchildren. I personally consider it would be ignorant of me in the extreme to deny my own children access to the wisdom that I have now been lucky enough to discover. In ancient cultures, the grandparents, or even the great-grandparents, were much more closely involved in guiding and educating the children. Living in a tribal community made this much more possible than today, and it makes sense that the older folks would have had more experience of life and more wisdom to impart. Obviously not all grandparents may be considered ideal mentors for our children, but old-fashioned views often have more relevance to modern life than we sometimes give them credit for. The tendency for the younger generation to think that they know better than their elders could perhaps usefully be tempered by some humility in the face of age and wisdom. The fact that Grandad does not know how to use a smartphone is irrelevant when considering that some of these anecdotes will contain wisdom which often only comes in later life. Real wisdom has real relevance in modern life. Spirituality has been around for millennia, and it's the egomania of the modern world that is out of touch with the reality of ancient beliefs and practices. Progress down the wrong road is not progress at all. In many respects, humankind can be thought of as regressing, and this is the world that we are raising our children to believe in. I now believe that teaching spiritual principles to young children would be the most precious gift we could ever possibly give them. It may perhaps seem weird to think about teaching a young child to meditate, but the Dalai Lama is a very wise man, and his views on teaching meditation to children make perfect sense to me. It will be a skill that would last a lifetime and give them access to a world of limitless possibilities. We are kidding ourselves when we produce kids whilst we are still effectively kids ourselves. We owe it to our children to guide them and teach them how to live from spirit rather than from ego. We cannot do this if we don't embrace spirituality ourselves. The way we raise our children will directly and powerfully dictate how they experience their lives. We can create a joyful future life for our offspring, or we can create a nightmare. We can create heaven on earth for them, or we can create hell. It's a sobering thought to realize that we are the ones who largely choose for them. Our personal spirituality has implications way beyond our own lives. When we stop kidding ourselves, then our children will benefit far more than we will ever know.